Christ is risen. Christos anesti. Christos voskrese. El Mesich kom. Ha Mashiach kom. Christus resurrexit. Cristo ha resucitado. Christos anviat. Christi uniao. Aristotosu fukatsu. Hidu fuhola. Christo boahashane. 4 Kings, 2 Kings in Hebrew, chapters 4 and 5. And one of the wives of the sons of the prophets cried to Elisei, saying, Thy servant my husband is dead, and thou knowest that thy servant feared the Lord, and the creditor is come to take my 2 sons to be his servants. And Elisei said, What shall I do for thee? Tell me what thou hast in the house. And she said, Thy servant has nothing in the house, except oil wherewith I anoint myself. And he said to her, Go, borrow for thyself vessels without of all thy neighbors, even empty vessels, borrow not a few. And thou shalt go in, and shut the door upon thee and upon thy sons, and thou shalt pour forth into these vessels, and remove that which is filled. And she departed from him, and shut the door upon herself and upon her sons. They brought the vessels near to her, and she poured in until the vessels were filled. And she said to her sons, Bring me yet a vessel. And they said to her, There is not a vessel more. And the oil stayed. And she came and told the man of God. And Elisei said, Go and sell the oil, and thou shalt pay thy debts, and thou and thy sons shall live off the remaining oil. And a day came, when Elisei passed over to Solomon, and there was a great lady there, and she constrained him to eat bread. And it came to pass, as often as he went into the city, that he turned aside to eat there. And the woman said to her husband, See now, I know that this is a holy man of God, who comes over continually to us. Let us now make for him an upper chamber, a small place, and let us put there for him a bed, and a table, and a stool, and a candlestick. And it shall come to pass, that when he comes into us, he shall turn in thither. And the day came, and he went in thither, and turned aside into the upper chamber, and lay there. And he said, Gehazi, his servant, call me this Solomite. And he called her, and she stood before him. And he said to him, Say now to her, Behold, thou hast taken all this trouble for us. What should I do for thee? Hast thou any request to make to the king, or to the captain of the host? And she said, I dwell in the midst of my people. And he said to Gehazi, What must we do for her? And Gehazi his servant said, Indeed, she has no son, and her husband is old. And he called her, and she stood by the door. And Elisei said to her, At this time, next year, as the season is, thou shalt be alive and embrace a son. And she said, Nay, my lord, do not lie to thy servant. And the woman conceived, and bore a son at the very time as the season was, being alive, as Elisei said to her. And the child grew, and it came to pass, when he went out to his father to the reapers, that he said to his father, My head, my head. And his father said to his servant, Carry him to his mother. And he carried him to his mother, and he lay upon her knees till noon, and died. And she carried him up, and laid him on the bed of the man of God, and she shut the door upon him, and went out. And she called to her husband, and said, Send now for me one of the young men on one of the asses, and I will ride quickly to the man of God, and return. And he said, Why art thou going to him today? Is neither new moon, nor the Sabbath. And she said, It is well. And she saddled the ass, and said to her servant, Be quick, proceed. Spare not on my account to ride, unless I shall tell thee. Go, and thou shalt proceed, and come to the man of God to Mount Carmel. And she rode, and came to the man of God to the mountain. And it came to pass, when Elisei saw her coming, that he said to Gehazi his servant, See now, the Solomite comes. Now run to meet her, and thou shalt say, Is it well with thee? Is it well with thy husband? Is it well with the child? And she said, It is well. And she came to Elisei to the mountain, and laid hold of his feet. And Gehazi drew near to thrust her away. And Elisei said, Let her alone, for her soul is much grieved in her, and the Lord has hidden it from me, and has not told it me. And she said, Did I ask a son of my Lord? For did I not say, Do not deal deceitfully with me? And Elisei said to Gehazi, Gird up thy loins, and take my staff in thy hand, and go. If thou meet any man, thou shalt not salute him. And if a man salute thee, thou shalt not answer him. And thou shalt lay my staff on the child's face. And the mother of the child said, As the Lord lives, and as thy soul lives, I will not leave thee. And Elisei arose, and went after her. And Gehazi went on before her, and laid his staff on the child's face. But there was neither voice nor any hearing. So he returned to meet him, and told him, saying, The child is not awaked. And Elisei went into the house, and behold, the dead child was laid upon his bed. And Elisei went into the house, and shut the door upon themselves, the two, and prayed to the Lord. And he went up, and lay upon the child, and put his mouth upon his mouth, and his eyes upon his eyes, and his hands upon his hands, and bowed himself upon him, and the flesh of the child grew warm. And he returned, and walked up and down in the house, and he went up, and bowed himself on the child 7 times, and the child opened his eyes. And Elisha cried out to Gehazi and said, Call the Shunammite. So he called her, and she came in to him. And Elisha said, Take thy son. And the woman went in and fell at his feet, and did obeisance, bowing to the ground. And she took her son, and went out. And Elisha returned to Gilgal, and a famine was in the land. And the sons of the prophet sat before him. And Elisha said to his servant, Set on the great pot, and boil pottage for the sons of the prophets. And he went out into the field to gather herbs, and found a vine in the field, and gathered of it wild gourds, and his garment full. And he cast it into the cauldron of pottage, for they knew them not. And he poured it out for the men to eat. And it came to pass, when they were eating of the pottage, that lo, they cried out, and said, There is death in the pot, O man of God. And they could not eat. And he said, Take meal, and cast it into the pot. Elisha said to his servant Gehazi, Pour out for the people, and let them eat. There was no longer there any hurtful thing in the pot. And there came a man over from Betharissa, and brought to the man of God 20 barley loaves and cakes of figs of the first fruits. And he said, Give to the people, and let them eat. And his servant said, Why should I set this before 100 men? And he said, Give to the people, and let them eat. For thus saith the Lord, They shall eat and live. And they ate and left, according to the word of the Lord. Now Naaman, the captain of the host of Syria, was a great man before his master, and highly respected, because by him the Lord had given deliverance to Syria. And the man was mighty in strength, but a leper. And the Syrians went forth in small bands, and took captive out of the land of Israel a little maid, and she waited on Naaman's wife. And she said to her mistress, Oh, that my lord were before the prophet of God in Samaria, that he would recover him from his leprosy. And she went in and told her lord, and said, Thus and thus spoke the maid from the land of Israel. And the king of Syria said to Naaman, Go, and I will send a letter to the king of Israel. And he went, and took in his hand 10 talents of silver, and 6,000 pieces of gold, and 10 changes of raiment. And he brought the letter to the king of Israel, saying, Now then, as soon as this letter shall reach thee, behold, I have sent to thee my servant Naaman, and thou shalt recover him from his leprosy. And it came to pass, when the king of Israel read the letter, that he rent his garments, and said, Am I God, to kill and to make alive, that this man sends to me to recover a man of his leprosy? Consider, however, I pray you, and see that this man seeks an occasion against me. And it came to pass, when Elisha heard that the king of Israel had rent his garments, that he sent to the king of Israel, saying, Wherefore hast thou rent thy garments? Let Naaman, I pray thee, come to me, and let him know that there is a prophet in Israel. So Naaman came with horse and chariot, and stood at the door of the house of Elisha. And Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, Go and wash 7 times in Jordan, and thy flesh shall return to thee, and thou shalt be cleansed. And Naaman was angry, and departed, and said, Behold, I said, he will by all means come out to me, and stand, and call on the name of his God, and lay his hand upon the place, and recover the leper. Are not Abana and Pharpar rivers of Damascus better than all the waters of Israel? May I not go and wash in them and be cleansed? And he turned and went away in a rage. And his servants came near and said to him, Suppose the prophet had spoken a great thing to thee, wouldst thou not perform it? Yet he has but said to thee, Wash and be cleansed. So Naaman went down and dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the word of Elisha. And his flesh returned to him as the flesh of a little child, and he was cleansed. And he and all his company returned to Elisha, and he came and stood before him, and said, Behold, I know that there is no God in all the earth, save only in Israel. And now receive a blessing of thy servant. And Elisha said, As the Lord lives, before whom I stand, I will not take one. And he pressed him to take one, but he would not. And Naaman said, Well then, if not, let there be given to thy servant, I pray thee, the load of a yoke of mules, and thou shalt give me of the red earth. For henceforth thy servant will not offer whole burnt offering or sacrifice to other gods, but only to the Lord by reason of this thing. And let the Lord be propitious to thy servant, when my master goes into the house of Rimmon to worship there. And he shall lean on my hand, and I shall bow down in the house of Rimmon, when he bows down in the house of Rimmon. Even let the Lord, I pray, be merciful to thy servant in this matter. And Elisha said to Naaman, Go in peace. And he departed from him a little way. And Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, said, Behold, my lord has spared this Syrian Naaman, so as not to take of his hand what he has brought. As the Lord lives, I will surely run after him, and take somewhat of him. So Gehazi followed after Naaman, and Naaman saw him running after him, and turned back from his chariot to meet him. And Gehazi said, All is well, my master has sent me, saying, Behold, now are there come to me 2 young men of the sons of the prophets from Mount Ephraim. Give them, I pray thee, a talent of silver, and 2 changes of raiment. And Naaman said, Take 2 talents of silver. And he took 2 talents of silver in 2 bags, and took 2 changes of raiment, and put them upon 2 of his servants. And they bore them before him. And he came to a secret place, and took them from their hands, and laid them up in the house, and dismissed the men. And he went in himself, and stood before his master. And Elisha said to him, Whence comest thou, Gehazi? And Gehazi said, Thy servant has not been hither or thither. And Elisha said to him, Went not my heart with thee, when the man returned from his chariot to meet thee? And now thou hast received silver, and now thou hast received raiment, and oliveyards, and vineyards, and sheep, and oxen, and menservants, and maidservants. The leprosy also of Naaman shall cleave to thee, and to thy seed forever. He went out from his presence leprous like snow. Psalm 105, 106 in Hebrew, verses 16 through 31. They provoked Moses also in the camp, and Aaron the Holy One of the Lord. The earth opened and swallowed up Dathan, and closed upon the congregation of Abiron. And a fire was kindled in their congregation, and a flame burnt up the sinners. And they made a calf in Coreb, and worshipped the graven image. And they changed their glory into the similitude of a calf that feeds on grass. They forgot God that saved them, who had wrought great deeds in Egypt, wondrous works in the land of Cam, and terrible things at the Red Sea. So he said that he would have destroyed them, had not Moses his chosen stood before him in the breach, to turn him away from the fierceness of his anger, so that he should not destroy them. Moreover, they set at naught the desirable land, and believed not his word. And they murmured in their tents. They hearkened not to the voice of the Lord. So he lifted up his hand against them, to cast them down in the wilderness, and to cast down their seed among the nations, and to scatter them in the countries. They were joined also to Baal-Phegor, and ate the sacrifices of the dead. And they provoked him with their devices, and destruction was multiplied among them. Then Phinehas stood up, and made atonement, and the plague ceased, and was counted to him for righteousness to all generations forever. Proverbs chapter 23, verses 6 through 12. Sup not with an envious man, neither desire thou his meats. So he eats and drinks as if anyone should swallow a hair. And do not bring him in to thyself, nor eat thy morsel with him, for he will vomit it up, and spoil thy fair words. Say nothing in the ears of a fool, lest at any time he sneer at thy wise words. Remove not the ancient landmarks, and enter not upon the possession of the fatherless. For the Lord is their Redeemer, he is mighty, and will plead their cause with thee. Apply thine heart to instruction, and prepare thine ears for words of discretion. The Holy Gospel according to St. Luke, chapter 24, verses 36 through 53. And as they thus spake, Jesus himself stood in the midst of them, and saith unto them, Peace be unto you. But they were terrified and affrighted, and supposed that they had seen a spirit. And he said unto them, Why are ye troubled? And why do thoughts arise in your hearts? Behold my hands and my feet, that it is I myself. Handle me, and see. For a spirit hath not flesh and bones, as ye see me have. And when he had thus spoken, he showed them his hands and his feet. And while they yet believed not for joy, and wondered, he said unto them, Have ye here any meat? And they gave him a piece of broiled fish, and of a honeycomb. And he took it, and did eat before them. And he said unto them, These are the words which I spake unto you, while I was yet with you, that all things must be fulfilled, which were written in the law of Moses, and in the prophets, and in the Psalms concerning me. Then opened he their understanding, that they might understand the Scriptures. And he said unto them, Thus it is written, and thus it behooved Christ to suffer, and to rise from the dead the 3rd day, and that repentance and remission of sins should be preached in his name among all nations, beginning at Jerusalem. And ye are witnesses of these things. And behold, I send the promise of my Father upon you. But tarry ye in the city of Jerusalem, until ye be endued with power from on high. And he led them out as far as to Bethany, and he lifted up his hands, and blessed them. And it came to pass, while he blessed them, he was parted from them, and carried up into heaven. And they worshipped him, and returned to Jerusalem with great joy. And they were continually in the temple, praising and blessing God. Amen.